Today, I want to share with you a story not just of one individual, but the story of an entire country's fight for social justice and fairness. This memoir is titled Niskam Karmayogi, which is Nepali for selfless worker. And the man you see on the cover of this memoir is Ratna Prasad Kharel, my grandfather. There are 195 countries in the world, among which there are only 7 which have never been colonized. My home country, Nepal, is one of them. But just because we were never colonized doesn't mean that our people were always free. In fact, for 104 years, our people were under the Rana rule. They were a powerful family who hogged all of the power. They ruled with an iron fist, and there was no democracy, no freedom, no rights. My grandfather was born during the era of the Rana regime. The year was 1924, and Nepal was under the 74th year of the Rana rule. Now, my grandfather was born in a small village called Kavre. It is in a central rural district of Nepal. And during his time in Kavre, he realized he needed more opportunities, and he made his way to the capital city of Kathmandu. Over there, he realized he needed a job. So every single day, he would go to the garden outside the Rana's palace, hoping for the Rana to come out onto the balcony so that he could catch the Rana's eye and the Rana could invite him into the palace. It sounds silly, but that's how it worked back then. The Rana was the law, and anything he said went. He went day after day, until one day, the Rana, seeing this young man over there every single day, asked one of the guards to pick him up and bring him to the palace. When this happened, my grandfather got so scared looking at the guards that he ran away. Eventually, though, the guards brought him back, and when the Rana asked what he wanted, he said that he wanted a job. Impressed with his courage and conviction at that moment, the Rana granted him a job, and eventually he became a mukhiya and a bitari. The role of a bitari back then was basically the person that you would go to if you had any problems or concerns, whether it was a social injustice issue, whether it was the issue of food scarcity, or whatever it was. You went to the bitari and you waited for him to communicate your concern to the Rana. That was my grandfather's job, and the people who did this job before him didn't take it too seriously. But my grandfather, coming from humble beginnings, knew the problems of the everyday man. He knew that he wanted to give every citizen that came to him an equal chance and a right chance to get what they needed. He did things differently. He would hear every single person's concern. He would note it down. He would go back home. He would rewrite it, restructure it, memorize it, and tell it to the Rana the next day. He was so good at his job that he started to build a good momentum. People knew him as the guy that if I went and told him my problems, the Rana would listen and I would get what I needed. He also gained a good relationship with the Rana, so much so that the authoritative Rana started to ask him for his advice when it came to some of these cases. Now, even though all was going well for him, the closer he got to the Rana, the more he saw how unjust the entire political scenario was. How was it possible that all the power of a country laid in the hands of one family? The prime minister position, the government positions were passed down along the Rana family for over a century. He realized that in politics, for a country to develop, it should go to the person who was most capable. And with that, the dream of a democratic Nepal started in his heart. He realized it wasn't about doing his job right. It was about doing the right job. And in 1948, he quit his job and started joining the rebel forces to take down the Rana regime. Up to that moment, there had already been 2 attempts to take down the Rana. The first attempt happened several decades ago. This happened when a group of people decided to bomb the Rana palace. They were found out, and they were sentenced to jail for life. The second attempt is much more well-known in Nepal. It is known as the Rana Prasad. And during that time, a group of leaders came together and distributed anti-Rana posters all throughout the night. The Rana also found out, and he was very angry. He took all of them, hung them in trees, and shot them. Public execution, and people were angered. See, you can kill a man, but you can't kill an idea. And by then, my grandfather had already quit his job, Even during that movement, he used to work for the Rana all day, and at night he would go distribute posters. He decided to commit himself fully, and he also joined forces with the Prince Mahendra to take down the Rana and give back the power to the monarch. During that time, the Rana found out, and he was very angry. How could his trusted ally turn against him? The Rana demanded one thing from his soldiers: bring me his head. My grandfather found out, and he had to go in hiding for 3 years. The closest encounter happened when he was inside his house, and in the middle of the night, soldiers come. He quickly draped his sister's sari, he put a bucket of water over his head, and he pretended he was a woman going to take a shower. Unfortunately for his sister, who was tall and strong, the soldiers almost shot her, thinking that she was him. Eventually, though, the 3 years passed, and because of the public outcry, the Ranas finally had to step down, and the king came into power. When the king came into power, he enlisted 106 men to form a parliament. It became known as Nepal's first parliament, and my grandfather was also part of it. Their task was to figure out the government budget, to pass laws and do lobbying. As long as all of the 106 men could agree unanimously, it would be passed to the king, and the king would have to sign it off. Now, the first prime minister at the time, Koirala, was in power, and he had to quit just 1 year into his prime minister position. And the reason was he couldn't get everyone to agree on the budget. The loudest voice of opposition in the parliaments was always that of my grandfather's. He didn't want anyone to abuse their power. And so he would always question every cent in the budget. He would question every word in the promises. And he was stern in his delivery. Throughout time, he was able to create a legacy, and he was able to create an image of himself as a person who was truly fighting for the people, as a person who was truly passionate about the country's development. He rose through the ranks, and he became the Deputy Finance Minister of Nepal. When we interviewed a lot of the past politicians and prime ministers for this book, we found out that they all said that everyone was scared of him. In fact, he had once given a 9-hour speech consecutively, accusing the education minister of falsifying his budget. When the prime minister had to give the budget the next day, he decided to mix something in the tobacco that sat in my grandfather's parliament seat. And when my grandfather ate that tobacco and stood up to oppose the prime minister, he just started coughing and he had to sit back down. That day onwards, he vowed never to chew tobacco 24 hours before he had to enter the parliament. Throughout his time in parliament, he was also known as a hardliner, but also a charismatic individual. He was very involved in foreign politics, and once he went to China. And during his time in China, he met with Chairman Mao. It was with a lot of diplomats, and they met for dinner. During the dinner, Chairman Mao said that, you know what, we should have some alcohol, but I bet the Nepalese can't drink as much as the Chinese can. My grandfather took that as a challenge. By the end of the evening, he managed to outdrink every single person, and Mao, very impressed, signed and gave him a little red book with a nice little message that remained in our house until very late. During his time in parliament, which was 10 years, he was elected twice for a 5-year term each. He was able to do a lot of good things for our country. He was the person behind the Nepal's first link to China, a 114-kilometer highway called Godavari Highway. The highway itself was sponsored by China, but he realized that the villages and municipalities were not connected, and he wanted each household to be connected to the main road so that they could bring all of their products, all of their farmed vegetables and fruits to the main road and start selling them. He wanted every single individual to be financially self-sufficient and financially independent. So he came up with an innovative solution. Every household must send one person to go in front of their house and start digging and graveling the road. If you couldn't, you would have to provide money so that he could hire someone to do the job. He also realized through this process that for the public to really be able to develop, the public needs to understand that public property is public responsibility. He focused on education. He started building schools. In fact, the first school he established, he was only 26. In his own village, he established the first school where my mother and her 4 sisters were educated, and this too at a time where it wasn't the norm for girls to go to school. He knew in his heart of hearts that every single person was equal. And in a country that still has caste discrimination to this date, for his 5 daughters, he named them the 5 nicknames of different castes. there was Gurung Magar, there was Chopang, there was Sherpa, and there was Bote, which are all different caste groups. He wanted to show people that it didn't matter who you were or where you came from. The only thing that matters is that you have a good will and a good vision. There were a lot of other times that he came to the public's need. When there was a famine problem even, the US government and Indian government gave free food supply to the Nepalese government, and the government decided to sell it for 11 rupees per household. He was against it, and we see in the notes that was recorded back then how much he opposed that and how much he fought for the public during these times of emergency. He was a true man of his word, but still, even after all this development, he felt like the king wasn't doing right by the country. Still, he felt that there was no freedom of speech. Still, he felt the king was too involved. There was no true democracy. And one day, he decided with a couple other ministers to stage a protest. Now, speaking against the king was a big sin back then, but he did it anyways. He went to a place called Itumbahal and launched a big protest. He spoke for hours about how there are 13 more demands that the country needed. They needed to release political prisoners. They needed separation of government and monarchy. And he demanded that people should get freedom of speech. Ironically, right after the speech ended, he was sent to jail. He stayed there for 17 months. You may think that he was beaten down and tired, but even within the jail, he started his work as an advocate. He saw that a lot of these prisoners had mental illnesses, and they don't deserve to be in prisons. They deserve to be in hospitals. He started a 13-day hunger strike, demanding that all of the political prisoners should be released, and these people who had mental illnesses should get help. Everyone took notice. In fact, Amnesty International also wrote a column about him and his hunger strike. Finally, he was released. But he was released right after the election season had just ended, which meant he wouldn't be able to be part of politics. The king came with a proposition. Let's work together peacefully, and I'll give you high positions in government. All of the other ministers agreed. In fact, his jailmate at the time, Mr. Surya Bahadur Thapa, ended up becoming the prime minister. But my grandfather declined any political interference. He didn't want to be part of politics, and he famously said that if the party won't do what the public needs, then why should I join politics just to earn money? This is so relevant 50 years ago, but it's more relevant today, where so many countries, including my own, still have politicians who don't give up their seats, who don't let the new era come forward. They still hog on to their seats for selfish reasons, and he proved and he set a standard that was selfless, which brings me to the title of this book. When he was released from jail, he went back to his village, which was now flourishing because of all the good work he did. He had established a brick factory. He had established farmland. He gave education for free. He gave bricks for free so people could start their businesses and people could establish their houses. All his life, he lived by his heart and not by logic. And that is also the very reason that 1 year after he was released from his jail and went back to the village, he passed away just 1 year onwards. My grandmother writes in the book that it was a very beautiful day, up till 3 p.m. She had asked my grandfather what he wanted to eat for lunch, and he said eggs. She started boiling the eggs. Outside, suddenly, it started becoming windy, really rainy. My grandfather looked out at the porch, and he realized that there were 2 kids of the house help currently underneath a big shed with a lot of haze. The whole shed was about to collapse onto them. He takes one look and he runs out. He pushes the kids out, but in doing so, he falls, hits his head, and unfortunately passes away. My grandmother's eggs boiled, but her husband never came back. On that day, the Nepalese government declared it a black day, and Nepal was closed for business for 1 day. In his village, that was 7 days. People couldn't believe how many people came to the funeral, and the majority of the people in the funeral didn't even have shoes on. It went to show that he was the leader of the people, the common person, the simple person, the poor person. He was always honest all throughout his life, and even after he passed away, my grandmother bravely raised 5 children on her own and continued his legacy. She was part of the board of the school, and she set up a Ratna scholarship, sponsoring 2 children to study for their entire education. She was part of the hospital board, and at a time where a lot of women would die during childbirth, she started collecting milk powder and giving it to the children for free for those whose moms had passed away. During a time of malaria, she set up a station inside her house where people could collect blood samples. Even my mother remembers just being 10 years of age and collecting these blood samples. She was a wonderful woman, and she still is today, and I think that his legacy has passed down throughout our entire family. I believe that his legacy deserves to be known not just by Nepali-speaking people, not just by people in a particular country, but by all of us. He had a vision, and he saw a system that was unfair. I know that still a lot of us may feel that a lot of systems in the world are unfair, but we should do what he did and learn from his example. Have a big dream big, start small, and act now. That was his legacy, and that is what I hope everyone is able to take away from this speech. You're not able to read this book, but hopefully this is a good summary of what he's done with his life and how we can all be change makers, how we can all be advocates. It's very easy to live for ourselves, and a lot of people do that, but not a lot of people live for other people. Not a lot of people dedicate their lives for the betterment of others. So let us start from today to do something for ourselves, for our family, for our community, for our country, for our entire world. Let us make today that day. Thank you.